Welcome to A Little Bit Radical, a business podcast from Standing on Giants. I'm Rob, your host. Join me as I meet people and organisations who are doing things differently, challenging the status quo and, yes, might just be a little bit radical. Today, I'm talking to Sepas Seraj, founder of Pixeled Eggs. Pixeled Eggs is a digital agency that aims to give every good cause their edge. Their clients include the Earthshot Prize, World Cancer Research Fund, and the Royal Foundation for the Prince and Princess of Wales. They're also a certified B Corp, which of course we love here on A Little Bit Radical. Sepas, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Rob. Thanks for having me. Really happy to be here.
Thank you for joining us. So, Sepas, if you are a little bit radical and you're on our podcast, so we know that you are, what in your early life set you up for that?
So my early life, I'm from Iran, and I grew up at a time when the war broke out and we ended up moving to another country. So that's, I guess, it's a kind of story that's probably true for a lot of people these days. I think that maybe shaped my attitude towards certain things. But I think the thing that really shaped what I do now is probably just playing in bands all my life. It's the thing that I've sort of done right through my life until the point where I started this gig and I got too busy with it and I couldn't really do that anymore. But I think there's a certain kind of attitude that goes along with doing something like that I've tried to bring into work. And so that's probably what I would say has been the radical thing that shaped what I do.
Two great examples there. I'd like to ask you just a couple of follow-up questions. So, how old were you when you had to leave Iran?
I left in towards the end of the 70s. So I would have been about 7 or 8 years old.
I mean, in the world at the moment, we are seeing more and more refugees for various conflicts. Do you identify with that?
Yeah, I don't actually think about it a lot. I never have done. I never really felt that way. And I think because I've been in London for so long, when people ask me where you're from, I just tell them I'm a Londoner. That's kind of how I feel. So, there isn't a lot that actually ties me back to Iran. I mean, every 4 years, the World Cup sort of sends me back there, but that's pretty much about it. I keep an eye on the news and things like that. I think I was too small for it to make a difference. I think maybe when people are a bit older, they struggle more. Whereas for me, it just kind of happened and I just kind of got on with it.
It's interesting that you mentioned London and the identity of being a Londoner, an identity that I've felt as well. And I think that's one of the great things about great cities like London, isn't it? That we all go into this big pot and we feel part of that city. And maybe that could bring us on to music, because I do want to ask you a few more questions on that. So what kind of music, what sort of bands were you in?
So I started off in metal bands.
Nice. Are you a screamer?
Yeah, kind of. I shout, I think, more than I scream. I was sort of playing guitar in this metal band and I then discovered I really couldn't play. And I think to be in a metal band, you kind of need to be able to play. There's some really amazing musicians actually that exist within that kind of genre. And then I discovered punk music, which is perfect for me because it gives you all of that energy without necessarily needing the ability to play. So
yeah, you don't need as much of a technique in punk, do you? That's kind of the point.
I discovered quite early on that I could play quite fast. Not very well, but definitely fast. That's kind of set me on that path. So that's what I did for the bulk of my life. Yeah, and I think that's the kind of thing that I try to bring into work with me a little bit.
Yeah, tell us more about that. Tell us how you bring a punk ethos into your work.
Well, I mean, to be honest, it's not even the punk ethos. It's more what I enjoyed, which was like what we were doing was the bit that I liked the most was to get in a room with 3 or 4 people and make something good. And sometimes that was just, something good for us. It wasn't even necessarily anything we were trying to share with anybody. It was just the fun that we were having together. It's really difficult to describe that to anyone that doesn't do that. I think if anyone's ever played in any kind of band, any kind of music, those moments that happen in a rehearsal room, it's really difficult to describe them to people that haven't been there and haven't experienced it. It is the best thing in the world. It's that kind of feeling is amazing. So, we were playing a certain kind of music that was never going to appeal to a lot of people. And to be honest, it really wasn't about the fame and the money. I mean, I often think if somebody, not that it would ever happen, but if somebody was to offer that to us 20, 30 years ago, what would I have done? And I like to think that I wouldn't be that stupid not to take it. I probably would take it. But it wasn't about that. And I think that's the thing that's important to say. It was about what we created together. And I think that's what I'm trying to bring into work is, that same kind of mentality of a bunch of talented people get into a room together, making something good. And it's not about making it the biggest company in the world or the most amount of money or the biggest office or anything like that. That is not what it's about. And again, sometimes we explain that kind of stuff to people and it's hard for them to understand. If you tell someone that you play music, it's funny. Someone that I like a lot told me many years ago that people think you try to be Phil Collins and they don't understand why you're not. But that's not what it's about. This tells you how long ago this conversation happened, because Phil Collins was a big deal back then. But that's what I mean. It's just what I try to bring into what I do. I think the work is the thing that's the most important thing that we do. And that's the kind of mentality to just make sure that everybody thinks the same. I think it's because that's when you really create the best work.
I think that's a really great point. I played in bands when I was a teenager and then went into kind of more of the theatre side of things, and definitely identify with what you're saying about the magic of that rehearsal room and the connection with those people. And, I have also observed, presumably like you did, that I sort of went into my adult life expecting that to be the experience everywhere, whatever you were doing. And it's sometimes so far from that, so far from the joy and the creativity and the collaboration. And so I'm not surprised that you wanted to create that. And I identify with that magic that you have described, that feeling when you finally play something semi-decent together as a band is quite special, isn't it?
Well, yeah, everyone gets it right at one time. That's kind of what I enjoyed the most about what we were doing. But, we gigged a lot and that was fun. I sort of compare that to when we launch a website these days. Is that kind of all that work that you do then sort of culminates in this one show that you do, at the end of the month or whatever. It is about being in a room with a bunch of people that you enjoyed being around and creating something together. I think that's what I love about what I do.
And that shouldn't really be radical at all, should it? I mean, the name of our podcast, it shouldn't be radical at all.
It should be the norm, yeah. Everyone should feel this way.
Yeah, so often it is. So as an adult, do you think that you've become more or less radical, and what's been behind that?
The way I think about it is that I was doing things and caring about things that a 25-year-old should when I was 25. And now I'm caring about things that a 50-year-old should because I'm 50. And so I don't see I'm any less or more radical. I don't think I'm necessarily calmed down. I'm a lot less angry than I used to be. And I think that's just something that happens. But I don't feel like I'm any different. I think I sort of still feel like I care about stuff, and to me that's important. And things that were important back then are no longer important now, and I guess vice versa. When you were younger, you don't really care about some of the things that I care about today. So I don't know if it's any more or less. I think it's just a different context.
Yeah, identify with that. I never thought I'd care so much about pension contributions, frankly. Yeah,
they become important. Yeah.
Absolutely. So let's move on to work now and talk to us about Pixeled Eggs. When did you found the company? How did you come about to founding a company? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I started the company, actually it's coming up to almost exactly 13 years now. So December 2011 is when we got going. I started the company originally with a partner, so there was two of us, and I'd been working at a couple of large London agencies. I'm a developer, so most of the work that I did was technical, but I had a kind of a bit of an unhealthy interest in design, I guess, even though I can't design. It was about doing that good work again. I loved some of the work that we did at the previous agency I was at, and I just felt like there was a better way to go around doing that work. I could see some of the things that I didn't really enjoy as part of my working life. And I thought, well, if I sort of went ahead and did my own thing, then I don't have to do those things. So we started the company really with the intention of, we could see that a lot of agencies would outsource their interesting work to other smaller agencies. And we thought, well, we'll be those guys. We'll do the interesting stuff and not the mundane things. And that's kind of how it all started. We then went on to bring on a UX and design department and offer the whole end-to-end digital offering, I guess. So, we were doing everything from the UX bit to the technical bit to the maintenance afterwards. So we could do it all in-house. So yeah, that was kind of how we got going. It's mad that it's been 13 years. It is the longest job I've ever had. It doesn't feel that way. But yeah, it's been a great experience, I think.
I'm sure, yeah. You're a very similar age to Studying on Giants, actually. And, we work in the digital space as well. And so I'm interested on your reflections about how much the world has changed in terms of your work specifically. How much of the world has changed in that time? Because I'm guessing 13 years ago, we're talking about a time where you founded your company basically pre-social media, and
pretty much.
Yeah. And
I think there was Facebook.
Yeah, Facebook was just about coming on the scene, perhaps pre-Twitter. I remember one of my stories is that we're pre-Twitter, in the community building. Yeah, so how do you think about where we are in the digital world now and our digital lives?
I mean, there's a lot that I still love about it. And I think it has been such a massive transformation in terms of how we live our lives in general. There are things that I really don't like about it, but I think I would have felt that way regardless of what I do for a living. I don't like the fact that there is so much time wasted on really meaningless things online. I'm one of these people that worries about wasting my time. I'm constantly trying to do something during any given minute in any given day. And I worry that most people are just sitting there scrolling through their phones and just wasting time, basically. So that part of it, I really don't like. I get the entertainment and, I understand that people need some kind of a release, but I think we've gone a bit too far digitally with what we consume, the content that we consume. But at the other end of it, I mean, we are worlds away to where we used to be. If you look at things like scientific research and what AI has done for that kind of thing, it's really been quite amazing. We would never have done it had this internet thing not existed. So I think I've got kind of a healthy love and hate relationship. I don't think I'm actually that different to a lot of people. I think there's a lot of it that has completely transformed our lives. I mean, look at what we're doing now.
Right.
You and I are talking on a video call, sitting at very different places. And 10 years ago, if we wanted to do this, we probably had to go to a studio together.
Yeah, even pre-COVID, you'd go to a studio. It's quite incredible.
Yeah. So it has been a lot of change. And I think that's one of the things about what we do for a living is you do have to adapt quite quickly because things change, like technology changes all the time. It's so different now. Like what we do at the moment, even though we design and build websites, and that in essence hasn't changed a lot over the last 20 years, probably. Actually, so much has changed from a technology perspective, from a design pattern perspective to how people consume content again, the lack of attention that people have sometimes, that has moved sites in terms of the content that they produce and how it's structured. So yeah, in a way, things haven't moved on all that much, but actually from a technology point of view, from a design perspective, we're worlds apart from where we were 10 years ago.
Do you remember who your very first client was or what that project was 13 years ago?
I do, yes. I funny enough, I looked at it yesterday because it just popped up. Yeah, it was to build an email campaign, which probably took us about half a day to do. It was actually for someone's little personal project that they were doing. So it wasn't like a big client tour. But we were like, oh, awesome. This is great. We've got a project and it pays.
Yeah, someone actually handed over hard-earned cash for you to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we've built another email campaign since, so maybe one or two. But yeah, it was just such a small project, but we were really excited because that meant that we'd got going. And then we started to, really early on, started to work with some really amazing clients. We were really lucky. We were working, actually, our model when we started off was to work with other agencies. So we would effectively just do the implementation, the technical implementation for them. And so that sort of led to us working with quite a diverse list of clients because we were working with different agencies who specialize in different sectors and areas. And it was great for us because we then had a big diverse list of work that we were working on.
Obviously, today you're a certified B Corp. You're part of this kind of purpose-driven business movement. When did that start to come into your field of view? And now you work, largely with very purpose-led organizations as well. You've got a a lovely list of clients that are all doing real good for the world. When did that become kind of part of your strategy and your ways of working?
I mean, it wasn't by design, not initially anyway. We were just talking about it, but we were just happy to work with any client when we first got going. We were lucky because really early on, we started working with organizations like One and Macmillan Cancer Support. And that kind of put us really, within this kind of charity sector. And that led to us working with other charities. And, that then led to us learning a whole heap of stuff around what it means to create a good user experience for audiences that come to charity websites. I think it happened kind of organically. And then about maybe 5, possibly 6 years ago, when we were thinking about things like B Corp and we hadn't really started our journey. We'd only just mentioned it. I think we just thought, oh, there's this interesting thing happening we should look at. We just felt that it was an area that we were really good at and we were working with some really amazing clients with. And we thought it's time that we could maybe make more of a thing of. And we just went in that direction about 5 or 6 years ago. Before that, our clients were quite diverse and we were working with a few corporates and some other organizations and businesses. But once we went down that path, we realized that actually we really loved it. It gave us a much better sense of what we were doing. I often say this internally when we have catch-ups, but we're here to support these really amazing organizations. We're not just selling shoes to people or something like that. We're helping people that really make a difference in other people's lives. And I think that just makes everyone here feel better about what we do. So yeah, I know some companies start off like that and have a very firm purpose in mind. We didn't. For us, it kind of just happened.
Interesting. And then back to that point around being flexible. If you want to survive, as a small business, it seems like this was part of that as well.
Yeah, I guess so. And I think it was easier for us to make those decisions when we were just doing the technical bit because we were just doing a build. We weren't coming up with ideas or doing the design work. I think when we started to do the design work and the UX work and we could control what happened from end to end, then we just discovered that the work that we do now was actually what we love doing the most. And I think that's probably what it boils down to, Rob. It's having some joy in your work. I try really hard not to be judgmental about what other people do. If selling shoes is, bringing you joy, then that's absolutely what you should do. It's just, for me, I think this is the work that we're happiest doing. And these days, purpose comes in lots of different shapes and colors. It's not just charities that we're working with. A lot of organizations that are now trying to change the way that people live their lives, how environmental organizations, you mentioned the Earthshot Prize. Those things are making a real difference, and I think we're here to support those ideas as well. So it's not just charities or nonprofits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's come on to some of your work with clients. What's a piece? You mentioned the Earthshot Prize. What's an example that you think would best sum up your whole ethos and what you believe in and what Pixeled Eggs is really about? What piece of work would that be?
I actually think that is the perfect example. We actually got involved with that site when it was a one-page, literally a video saying something is coming.
Can you remind us what it is for anyone who might not have heard? Can you just remind us what the Earthshot Prize is?
For sure, yeah. So it's Prince William's initiative that encourages to companies and individuals to come up with solutions to environmental problems. And then at the end of every year, there's a prize ceremony and 5 of these organizations get selected as winners across different themes, and they get some money to bootstrap them and effectively try to enhance the impact that they're making and get them to a position where, they can do more, I guess. That's the idea. And we were involved with it right from the beginning. It was just this, there's going to be a prize, and now it's a whole platform. There are different things that happen throughout the year, the selection process, and obviously the prize ceremony is still a big thing that happens every year. So I think that's a really good example of where we started with something small and then evolved it into a really big, robust platform that it is now. And that is kind of how we like to work anyway. Whenever we get a project that's large, I always try and think about how do we simplify it to bring it down to a manageable size that we can actually deliver on time, and then phasing the rest of it. It's about that kind of prioritization. So it's a good example of how we do our best work is to, get involved with something, really understand what it's doing, put in the foundations. I think that's really important so that you can then grow the website or the platform or its content over time.
Every agency in the world says they want long-term partnerships with clients, but some of them don't really mean that. What they mean is it would be nice to keep getting money out of you for many years, but what we're actually interested in is getting the big project, getting the award, finishing it, moving on to something else. But it sounds like you very much do believe in having a partnership over a period of time. Why do you feel that way? How do you sort of nurture those relationships?
Yes, absolutely. We do love having those relationships. I think the reason, at least from my perspective, is that I really genuinely believe that that's when we do our best work. So when we really understand what's needed, and that takes time. That's not 2 workshops and you suddenly know everyone's business. That's just not how it works. The kind of organizations we work with, their priorities change all the time. The strategies are changing. What they do is evolving. And I think for us to know how to create the best thing for them, we need to understand that. So the reason I'm interested in those long-term relationships is because I think we do our best work for them. And we just try to open and honest. And sometimes the work that we do is complex and it doesn't go to plan. But we try to be as open as we possibly can with our clients. And I think that honesty is probably what's kept our clients with us for a number of years, or at least that's what I like to think that that's what's happened. One of the things that I always tell people is that when I started the business, I had no idea what I was doing. Honestly, I'm a technical guy. I'm a nerd. I don't really know how to run a business. Probably I still don't. But what I was pretty certain about was the things I didn't want to do. We kind of started off with that kind of mindset is, okay, what do we avoid doing? And that was treating clients in a certain way that I really didn't like from some of my past experiences, lying to people or just, not even just bending the truth is, that kind of stuff just didn't ever sit right with me. I mean, agencies say that they're collaborative, and I don't understand how anyone has any business being in an agency if they're not collaborative. But we try to genuinely do that, really try to feel part of or an extension of the team, as opposed to this kind of weird client agency relationship that can sometimes exist. And I think that's probably where we really try to create that kind of long-term relationship with clients.
Well, completely agree with you. We're just celebrating 9 years with one of our clients, Airbnb. There's something about when you've worked together that long that you do just have a kind of shorthand. A lot of our team have been there longer than the client side team have been, and so there's all this sort of help that can flow both ways. I think it's a really interesting kind of strategy. I don't know. It's not given the bandwidth. You do need to acquire new clients, of course you do, but there's a lot of work that can be done with your existing clients if you take the time to fully understand what they're doing. Sadly, we must move on, Sepas, to the third section of our podcast, which is a little bit radical world. And what's an idea for the world that you would like people to get behind? I'm hoping it's everyone should start a punk band, but if it's not, that's okay.
I think what I'd really like to see is less division between people. And I don't mean this in some kind of a hippie peace and love kind of thing. I think it's actually okay and it's pretty healthy not to agree with everyone and not to even like everyone. I think that's fine. And it is kind of fueled a little bit by what goes on in social media. I think sometimes, not down there, I don't want to put the blame at their door. I think there's too much division. And I think what we should do is celebrate what brings us together more rather than focus on what drives us apart. I don't know how we do this. I'm sure people much cleverer than me have tried this kind of stuff before. And I guess that movement's been going on for years now and it hasn't ever got anywhere. I don't know whether the way that we should frame this is that you can only really change yourself. You can only really change your own mind and your own perspective on things. So that's what I'd like to see. I think I'd like to see less division. I don't want everyone to be the same and feel the same and think the same. I love the fact that we're different. I love that we eat different food and have different cultures. And I think that's actually what's beautiful about the world. But we focus too much on the things that drive us apart. I don't think it helps when our politicians get involved in that kind of rhetoric. But yeah, I think that's probably what I would like to change about the world.
I think it's a really good one, Sepas, and actually several guests have said something similar. I'm starting to develop a theory on this, really, which is that it's easier than ever to avoid having a difficult conversation. I'm not necessarily thinking about it at the kind of macro political level, although I think that applies too. I'm thinking, more at this sort of micro level where you're talking about colleagues or clients or just people in your community. I think it's just very easy to avoid having a difficult conversation and to go into a conflict. I think generally we're very conflict avoidant, which I think is a bit counterintuitive given how toxic a lot of stuff out there is. But I feel like that's just sort of broadcasting. It's not having an actual sort of conflict and a discussion with someone. We can talk to people either that we love or hate on social media. We can just send an email instead of calling someone at work, or we put it on the Slack or the Google chat, or we just don't say anything. We ghost people. I think that's got to be something to do with it. My own personal theory that I'm developing.
To be honest, as a race, as a human race, we really need to start caring about this stuff a bit more, because like one of the things we talk about a lot in terms of our work is sustainability. We're trying to create websites that have a lower carbon footprint. And that stuff is complex and lots of people talk about it. And we do need to discuss this stuff. But whatever we're doing in our industry, in our world, is meaningless if there are wars going on around the world, because the environmental impact, even if you take out all the human suffering, which obviously you shouldn't, but if you do, then just the environmental impact of having these wars is going to destroy us. But that's never really the discussion. We talk about it much more in terms of politics. And I mean, I think that obviously the right thing to do is to focus on the human suffering, and that needs to end. I think we can only do that if we change our own perception of how we treat other people and what we think of them. I actually don't agree with both sides. I don't think lots of peace and love is necessarily helpful, because it's just unrealistic. And I think people that are constantly driving division between people, I don't know, maybe we should give them the kind of platforms.
Absolutely. Whether it's the culture wars or whether it's political polarization, we are becoming far more polarized, and that has got to seep into our general culture in a quite upsetting way somehow. So I'm signed up to that one. Sepas, definitely. No problem. We've got to bring our conversation to an end, sadly. And so I'll ask you the last question, which is always the same, which is that to someone listening who has a little bit of a radical idea, maybe for a business they want to start or a band they want to form or something for their personal life, whatever it may be, but they don't quite know where to get started, what advice would you give them?
I'm a big fan of physical movements when it comes to things like this. I actually think that if you just sort of get up and do something, then other things will just follow. You can sit around and think about it for forever and nothing will ever happen. But, like sometimes when I'm writing a proposal and I'm sat there thinking, trying to get my thoughts together, sometimes I just pick up this pencil and write a few things down, and it leads to other things. And then you just kind of go from there. So I mean, obviously the advice is just do it. But I always think that doing something physical to go along with whatever idea you've got just always really helps me, at least.
Well, you talk about proposals. It's always a walk for me if I'm sat there procrastinating endlessly from writing a proposal or a pitch. It always has to be going for a walk and listening to a podcast or something, and then I come back and it's just then sort of flies out in comparison. Yeah. So I go with that.
Yeah. Whereas if you just sat here staring at it, nothing will ever happen. I mean, I wish I could go back and say that to myself about 30 years ago. I had some really good ones. I think people were like, I'm pretty sure there was a guy sat next to me in McDonald's that day when I was writing this idea down, and someone else did it before I did. I'm not going to tell you who it was.
Oh, what? Oh my gosh. It's got to be 30 years. What are we talking? eBay? Something like that? Facebook?
Yeah, not quite those. But I think people should absolutely follow your heart and get off your backside, I think, is probably the way to do it.
Get in the rehearsal room with those people, right? Because
Yeah,
even if you don't play the O2, you might have created something good by the end of it.
yeah, absolutely.
Lovely. Sepas, lovely to meet you. Thank you so much for giving us your time and hope to speak to you again soon. Thank you for listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it, please follow us on your podcast platform. If you'd like to appear on A Little Bit Radical or have an idea of someone we should speak to, please email podcast@standingongiants.com or get in touch with me on LinkedIn. You can search Rob Fawkes or search Standing on Giants and you'll find me there. Thank you very much and speak to you next time.